We've all seen a movie or TV show where some sleazy guy in a suit prints fake US dollars on a giant printer inside a decrepit warehouse. For Frank Borusa, this trope was a reality, and one he was really good at. Unlike the fictional depictions, printing and distributing is very difficult to pull off, making Borusa's criminal achievements more impressive. He created a fake $20 bill that no one could detect with the naked eye. In fact, only trained professionals can tell the difference between a U.S. Mint printed $20 bill and a Borusa 20. Borusa printed thousands and thousands of Andrew Jacksons during his stint as a money counterfeiter. In total, he printed over 250 million worth of 20s. Some of those bills stayed in circulation long after the authorities shut his printing factory down. The Secret Service continued finding his forged bills in California, Nevada, and small pockets of the northeastern United States. According to Celebrity Net Worth, 250 million is a lot of fake money in the counterfeit business. It's actually the all-time record for the most counterfeited money in U.S. history. And he's not even from the United States. Borusa grew up in Quebec, Canada, where he showed an aptitude for entrepreneurship at a very early age, though his business strategies usually involved making money outside of the law. Borusa started his first business when he was in junior high. How? He realized how easy it was to shoplift. He stole from all kinds of stores, took the items home, organized them, then sold them to distributors he knew from school. Before young Borusa knew it, he built a flourishing shoplifting ring. When Borusa turned 15, he quit the shoplifting ring and dropped out of high school. He moved out of his parents' house to work at a mechanic shop. However, the job didn't pay well, and Borusa often resorted to car theft to pay his bills. Eventually, Borusa got tired of working for someone else, so he founded a shoe factory in his early 20s. It was his first legal business. Running the actual business proved very difficult, a factor Borusa overlooked when he decided to start an honest business. Borusa decided the best thing to do was to sell the factory, which he did. According to media interviews, Borusa says running the factory burned him out. He claims he worked 20 hours a day. And for what? He kept asking himself. Borusa thought about it philosophically and came to a simplistic conclusion. Just like everyone else, he worked for money. Money was always the end goal. Borusa says he reached this conclusion while waiting at a red light. He came up with the idea to make money instead of working for it. However, as mentioned earlier, literally making money isn't as easy as it sounds. So, for the time being, Borusa returned to a different kind of crime, growing cannabis. Borusa literally grew his business to extreme heights, higher than his previous businesses, and it probably would have grown even more had he not got caught by the Mounties. The former cannabis grower spent 4 months in jail. Borusa decided enough was enough when he got out. It was time to try counterfeiting money. The first thing Borusa did was research. Lots of research. He wanted to do this right. He already learned how to grow his cannabis without any previous experience in the industry. He knew what it took to create a complex business from scratch. His primary source, ironically, was the United States Secret Service website. There he learned that he had to counterfeit US dollars exclusively because of the type of paper they used. The US Mint still uses a combination of linen and cotton to manufacture their paper dollars, which is apparently an archaic way of making money. Borusa says the paper is easier to counterfeit. For example, other countries, even third world African nations, have moved on to better types of paper made of polymer. Still, the U.S. adheres to the linen and cotton material of old. The new paper most countries use is almost impossible to reproduce, making it impractical to print when the United States' dollar is much easier. The Secret Service also mentioned what kind of printers they use to make U.S. dollars. Remember, it was the early 2000s. Things were different. By then, Borusa had every bit of information he needed. He knew what kind of printer he needed and where to get it. He also learned what companies made the linen and cotton paper used to make U.S. dollars through his research. All he had to do now was put his plan into action. The first thing Borusa needed was a printer. The only problem, money printers are expensive. Many sold in the 6-figure range, which is a lot of money for an ex-con with no real job. The rest of the necessary equipment, such as materials or ingredients, as Borusa calls them, were just as costly. Somehow, Barusa got the money together. He bought the printer for $125,000 and the paper materials cost $50,000. After adding up all the other expenses, the venture cost Barusa 325,000 Canadian dollars. The trickiest part, Barusa says, was getting the paper made. He bought the ingredients, but he needed a paper mill to manufacture the paper for him. If not, there was no way he could do that himself. The paper had to be made in a specific way, 75% cotton and 25% linen. He also needed them to put watermarked images of Andrew Jackson on the front of the paper. The image was a distinct mark of the legit $20 bill. Barusa says checkers hold the bill up to the light for verification. Without the watermark, anyone could spot them as fake. Fortunately, Barusa discovered the only paper mills that made paper like this were in Europe. The tricky part would be getting them to manufacture American paper bills with real watermarks. For that, Barusa needed a good plan. Enter Thomas More. Barusa contacted the European paper mills, specifically in Switzerland, as someone else, a fictional man named Thomas More. More asked the mills to make his paper into bills, the same size as a US dollar, along with the same ingredients as a dollar. At first, the mills were suspicious. Barusa assured them that he was legit, however. He told them he was an investment manager from the United States. His company wanted to manufacture their own bonds. Barusa told them that the bonds had to be made from secure paper. The mills believed Barusa's story. He was surprised they weren't suspicious, especially since he was printing Andrew Jackson's image onto his bills. Eventually, Barusa says he realized that most people in Switzerland didn't know who Andrew Jackson was, much less what he looked like. In other words, they didn't think twice about printing the watermark. Everything was going according to plan. Barusa instigated his plan in 2004 and didn't complete the printing operation until 2008. He and his crew printed 20s as quickly as possible until they built a massive inventory of fake cash. Now, he just needed some clients. Barusa maintained a few relationships with contacts in the criminal underground. He was specifically looking for organizations that needed clean money. Some of these organizations were looking to pump their money into continents like Africa, Asia, and Europe. Ideally, Barusa wanted his bills to circulate in these areas first before entering the United States. If the money moved around in these foreign nations before hitting the U.S., it'd be hard for federal agents to trace them back to Barusa. The newly established counterfeiter tasked one of his associates with finding organizations that fit Barusa's criteria. The associate had ties to the criminal underworld, so it wasn't long before Barusa had a few clients lined up. Barusa had the counterfeit business down to a system. First, an order came in. If an organization needed $100,000 in 20s, Barusa charged them $30,000. On a much smaller scale, his rate was $6 real for every 20 fake dollars. Most customers ordered six-figure sums like $100,000 or $200,000. Business was good. Barusa made all his money back in less than 3 orders. He says at the time there was no doubt in his mind that he would be a multi-millionaire. The dream was right there before him, and he didn't want to lose it. To protect his dream, Barusa became more paranoid with each subsequent order. The operation ran out of a big garage owned by the uncle of one of his associates. Barusa says he spent many hours looking through binoculars from the window while his team counted and packaged 20s. Waiting on the paper shipments from Switzerland was torture, he says. They often took weeks to arrive, and weeks were more than enough time for a team of cops to set up a sting at the harbor. Nevertheless, Barusa pushed past his paranoia and kept the business going. Eventually, he reached his 5th client who ordered $100,000 worth of 20s, a pretty normal order. Then the next day, that same client ordered another $100K, which seemed a little odd. Nevertheless, Barusa delivered the order, not knowing that the 5th client was an undercover agent posing as a gangster. On May 23, 2012, at 5 in the morning, Barusa woke up to someone yelling at his front door. Then, the person slammed on the door, screaming for him to come quietly. Barusa opened the door and saw a squad of Royal Canadian Mounted Police representatives and 2 U.S. Secret Service agents standing on his doorstep. The Mounties took Barusa into custody and charged him with several counts of fraud. They explained to Barusa that he was probably facing around 60 years in prison for what he'd done. The police had already located $949,000 in Barusa's counterfeit 20s. They had all the evidence they needed, but they didn't have all the fake 20s, anywhere near all $250 million worth. In fact, they didn't know it existed. In a crazy turn of events, the Canadian government realized they couldn't use some of the evidence they obtained from Barusa's business. The evidence itself was inconclusive, and they released him on a $10,000 bond. Meanwhile, the Secret Service watched Barusa like a hawk, waiting for him to mess up. Barusa was walking on a tightrope. The Secret Service would inevitably catch him doing something illegal and extradite him to America. The Secret Service and the Canadian government didn't want Barusa circulating fake money anymore after he told them how much he had stashed away. So the Canadian government brokered a deal with Barusa. We'll only charge you with drug possession, fine you $1,500, and imprison you for 45 days if you hand over the rest of your counterfeit money. Barusa accepted the deal and spent less time in jail for counterfeiting than he did growing cannabis. When Barusa was released from prison, he started his own security company, similar to another Frank who's famous for mass forgery. Barusa also founded a self-help brand called the Paradigm Shift System. He's become a guru of sorts. Now, he might follow in the footsteps of Frank Abagnale and have a biopic produced based on his life. If Barusa's life is immortalized on screen, he could become America's next legendary criminal folk hero. But only time will tell. Click to watch one of these next videos and let us know in the comments section what you'd rather have. 10 million in cash of the best counterfeit bills or $500,000 of real money.